Well, hello class. From January 9th through January 15th, we're going to be covering chapters 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Would you believe that? We're going to be covering 5 chapters in 7 days. And I think that's quite remarkable. So, having said that, let's highlight some of the different things that we're going to cover. And the first thing we're going to cover in chapter 5 is the leader's responsibility for setting organizational direction. And this chapter's purpose is essentially to teach and coach leaders on the important concepts and processes that are necessary in order to develop meaningful vision, mission, and operational intent, which is really strategic planning, that is going to influence the actions of the organization stakeholders for personal and organizational success. We're going to be looking at the nature and role of having a vision, and getting that vision and make a statement out of it, which eventually turns into a clear, well communicated strategy that can benefit employee or subordinate activities. So that is going to be kind of the primary direction in chapter 5. When we get to chapter 6, we're going to be looking at, we always talked about developing employees as leaders, but we also know how important it is to develop employees as followers. So the purpose of this chapter is to really introduce the concept of human resource management and how those concepts are useful in helping those that are in leadership positions. So we're going to be looking at things like interviewing, legal considerations, hiring, making an offer to a new employee, and training and development. And this chapter really goes into the need for mentoring. We all know how important mentoring is, especially to develop leaders. They need to have good mentors. And I think we learned a lot from listening to that interview with Ken Strong, the co-author of my book, Leadership is a Choice, and how he was thrown into a situation that he never ever intended he would do, and that would be to run a nursing home when his father got ill. And he really needed a good mentor. And as he said, he traveled with his father all across the country when he was doing consulting, and he learned so much. And then when it came time for him to shine, he was able to do it because he had a really good mentor. And I think that was actually the essence of our book. Moving on to chapter 7. Now we're getting into motivation as a responsibility of leadership. You cannot, and I repeat, you cannot be an effective leader unless you're able to motivate the people that you lead. So we want to, in this chapter, really introduce motivation concepts to you. And the first part of this chapter, chapter 7, is to discuss job progression withdrawal theory. We're going to learn a lot about that. And then we're going to discuss practical applications of motivational theory. And then finally, we're going to look at the way managers can motivate employees, managers as leaders, leaders as managers. But the bottom line is no matter what you are and what you do, if you can't motivate yourself, you can't motivate anyone else. So you have to have a passion and belief in what you're doing. But That first responsibility is to you, to motivate. You got to motivate you. You want to find out the leader that's within you, you got to motivate you before you get out and you motivate anyone else. So we're going to talk a lot about that in this chapter. When we move on to chapter 8, we're going to be talking about effective decision making. Whether we plan for making decisions or don't plan, the idea is we need to review the leadership importance and practice of implementing and making good decisions. Now, that isn't to say we'll always make the right decision. That isn't always that isn't always to say that we will make decisions that are going to be 100% accurate. We need input. We need input from our subordinates. Before we make that right decision, okay, before we take the least amount of risk, we need to be able to listen. We need to be able to communicate from the top down, from the bottom up, and laterally. So we're going to look at several decision-making models and factors that are going to help us analyze what's going on while you're working on a decision. Some of the biggest decisions that had to be made in history were not made on the cuff. They were made because they were well-trained people that had to make decisions on the cuff, but the decision itself was not translated on the cuff. It took a lot of time to develop what to do in planned decision making and non-planned decision making. So we're going to also look at the common types of different organizational phenomena that negatively impact effective decision making. What happens when emotions get in our way, when we plan on doing something and it doesn't pan out because some of the variables are missing? Do we know what to do when we have to do it? And do we know who to call from our orchestra to continue making music if we're the conductor? So these are some of the things we're going to talk about in effective decision making. And the last chapter is going to be about the most important ethical leader. It seems that these days we have a trouble defining what ethics is. And we often know that ethical theory and the law do not always see eye to eye. But here we're talking about introducing the concepts of ethics and social responsibility. In an organization, we know that ethics starts with the core values. And those core values integrate with the organizational culture. This chapter is going to address the source of ethics and give examples on creating an ethical company culture. Not just rules in a book, it's the culture itself that actually practices those procedures that make the company what it is. We're also going to discuss about corporate social responsibility, about giving back from both a personal and an organizational perspective. So that is an overview of what we're going to be talking about this coming week. And thought I would put that in perspective. And to follow, I thought I would show you this wonderful video that I used from a very influential guy about leadership in education, Dr. David Sabaki, our provost. I did this about, I want to say it was 2 years ago when we made this video. And I interviewed him when I taught this course on ethical leadership. Enjoy.